Up next, we have Brian Abelson with Saysynth, a synthesizer built on Mac's text-to-speech framework.
All right, hey everyone. I'm Brian Abelson. All my stuff online is Abelson Live. If you want to tag me in anything. This QR code goes to the slides, which I realize is pretty worthless, but there's some other links down there. Okay, so yeah, I'm talking about Saysynth, which is a synthesizer I built on Mac's text-to-speech framework, or more popularly known as the Say command. But I'm gonna kind of talk more generally about just like speaking machines in general over time and kind of why they matter, especially in the context of AI. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit about Saysynth and how it was made, and then play a couple things. If I have time, I'll play it off of this mini Mac, which I'll explain why I have to have that, or Mac Mini. Okay, so like this is like a general typology of speaking machines that I kind of made up. Basically, there's like 4 types. You can have a mechanical one. It's like literally where you have like bellows that are forcing air through a reed, and then there's different knobs and whistles that are creating different formants and phonemes. You can have like a formant or a rule-based speaking machine, and this is more like an actual synthesizer where you have an oscillator and like a comb filter that is simulating the vocal tract shape to like create different phonemes. There are sample-based speaking machines, and this is like where, and this can be as crude as just like you could think of like one of those boards where you like click different buttons and it says different phrases, to like recordings of what are called diphones, like combinations of phonemes, and then these systems sort of splice them together. And then like what people are more used to these days, which are these sort of generative neural based speaking machines, and like these are basically just sample based, except like you're talking about one digital sample rather than like these sort of combinations of sounds. I'm gonna kind of give some examples of all these now. So this is like the first speaking machine that most people point to from the 1700s. I'm gonna play it, it's wacky. Sorry. Wait, here. Get up here. All right, so how this basically works is like there's this operator who's pushing air through a reed here, and then they like move their hand around on this like piece of leather to kind of like simulate the shape of a vocal tract. And then there's like different whistles that they can trigger to make like more noisy like consonants, like an S or a T. And like this is super crude, but as you'll see, like as we go along, like this basic like combination of systems is what we see in most like formant or rule-based speech machines. This is like a later example of basically the same system as von Kempelen's, but like far more sophisticated. And this was like it introduced, you can't really see in this image, but there's like 16 keys, and each of those keys generate a different phoneme. And so you see the like importance of the operator in like playing this machine. And like, I guess to make it seem less scary, they put this like image of a woman on the front of it. And sometimes they would actually like, the guy like Joseph Faber who made it, he would like hang a dress like in front of the machine to kind of make it seem less scary, which honestly I think that probably had the opposite effect. Okay, this is like not really a speaking machine, but I think it's interesting in the kind of history. This is like what I'm calling like the first concatenative speaking machine, and basically this is like a doll that had a phonograph in it, and Edison like thought of this as like a way to like market the phonograph in a way that was like not scary to people, but as you'll see, so obviously horrified. And like there were like 20 different dolls like this, and different recordings of different like childhood rhymes like this. And like this is just like kind of the first example of using samples to make speaking machines, which gets far, far more sophisticated. Oh wait. I'm missing a slide. Huh. Oh well. Well, actually, I can probably just look this up. Sometimes DuckDuckGo sucks.
The machine uses only two sounds produced electrically.
Phil, just watch.
One of these represents the breath. The other, the vibration of the vocal cords. There are no phonograph records or anything of that sort. Only electrical circuits such as are used in telephone practice. Let's see how you put expression into a sentence. Say, she saw me, with no expression.
She saw me.
Now say it in answer to these questions. Who saw you?
She saw me.
Whom did she see?
She saw me.
Did she see you or hear you?
She saw me.
So this is like actually like really cool actually. Like for its time, it was really just like this completely unexpected technology. That demonstration I think was actually at the World's Fair in 1939. And basically this system is like a monophonic synthesizer. There's an oscillator and then a random noise generator, and then all of these different controls for like manipulating that oscillator and generating different phonemes, and then like being able to control the pitch via a foot pedal. So like the actual like most impressive part about this is the operator. These were women called voderettes. And they had to train for literally years to be able to do what you just saw. And I just think, I'll talk about this more, but it's just like interesting that everyone sort of celebrates this dude for creating this when like the actual, genius of it was the operation of this machine. So getting further along, this is an example from Italy of what's called like a diphone speech synthesizer. They press this to vinyl, which is cool.
Fra Martino campanaro dormitu, suona le campane.
So like that is actually technically a recording of a human, recording each like combination of possible phonemes. I think it could be like 20 or like 2,000, and then different like DSP processes to like stitch them together and smooth the transitions. And this is like a technology that ended up being used a lot in like the 90s and 2000s. So like the early like GPS systems all did this, and like automated customer service phone lines did this. So it's like something that got far more sophisticated, but was a pretty dominant technology for a while. This is like the first like really commercially available speech synthesizer that was built into the Commodore 64 and the Atari and the Apple II. It's called SAM. The cool thing here to notice is like that it allowed the user to control the pitch and the speed and the inflection. And actually the company that made this their technology was the basis for Macintosh's Macintalk, which I'll talk about in a second. This like ability to control these parameters is basically what I'm using to create the synthesizer that I'll talk about. So like, just before I go on, I think there's like a couple of patterns here across history that are interesting to sort of talk about. One is that like speaking machines are oftentimes demonstrated using singing. And like there's two reasons for this. One is that like singing shows like control over prosody, or the ability to, or like a voice's ability to change tone or timbre or rhythm. But it's also this like sense that singing is like the ultimate like human expression of language, and that like a speaking machine isn't truly human or can't be considered like natural unless it can sing. And then the other thing, of course, is like the like inherent sexism embedded in all of these things. So like, to make the euphonia seem less threatening, they like literally put a woman's face on it and hung a dress off of it. The fact that like the voder was celebrated as this like feat of engineering when it was just like a monophonic synth that these women trained years to play and are now basically nameless to history. Now like thinking that like most of these like AI assistants are voiced by women, are female-like voices, and that once again like replicating this idea that like these technologies seem less threatening when they have like a female visage. So moving on to like Say and Macintalk. This is like the first demo that Steve Jobs gave of Macintalk.
Today, for the first time ever,
Wow.
I'd like to.
It's like demo gods.
But to self.
So yeah, he shows a video. It's unclear. Oh, screw it. Anyways, like he the thing just like makes fun of IBM computers, and people laugh and then cheer for him for like 3 minutes afterwards. It's pretty annoying video actually. So anyways, Macintalk, if anyone had like a Apple computer in the 90s, they're probably familiar with the text-to-speech capabilities and like the voices like Bad News or Cellos or Bubbles or Whisper or Princess, and probably had, like me, had a lot of fun playing with these. In the 2000s, with the release of Mac OS X, they added a command line interface to the text-to-speech capabilities called the say command. You know, it's basically triggered by this. How many people have used this before? Not that many. Okay, I'm surprised. Say, or generally speaking, Mac's speech synthesis framework had some sort of hidden advanced capabilities for controlling phonemes. So this is like an example of saying, what is it? It's like, are you brushing your teeth, I think? But broken down by phoneme, and then sort of specifying the duration of the phoneme and then like the pitch curve. And these are actually like, this is like a frequency, and this is like a position in this duration, and sort of, you can actually get quite expressive with the syntax here. I couldn't really find any example of other people that have used this, and I found this on like an archived like documentation site. And now it's actually deprecated. It no longer is part of Mac OS, which is why I have to use this Mac Mini to demonstrate it. And so without going too deep into the implementation of this, which I can talk about more in questions if you're interested, I use this DSL to sort of create a synthesizer. And in this, like, I was really less interested in like using this as a tool to transmit information, like to actually replicate like a piece of text and have that be legible. I think in some ways that's like less interesting than pushing the synthesizer in a direction that it wasn't intended for, which I'll talk about a bit more later. But and there's a few different interfaces for this. One is like a command line tool, but because I'm a back-end engineer, I allowed you to use YAML files to make sort of sequences. And so you can sort of specify different tracks, and you can have chords with roots and specify the voice and different ways of breaking up the text into segments and different forms of randomization and ADSR. Anyways, that sort of sounds all like this. So like the main chord is this one here. There's the thing that's saying fire is here. That little high thing is actually saying wind. And then later in the song, there's like sort of more ambient pads that come in. So like one thing that's like interesting about this is like basically like the chord is created by spawning, in this case, 6 different sub-processes of the say command. And so there's really no way to control timing here. Like, these things are going to slowly move in and out of phase, which actually makes it sound more beautiful and interesting and like human-like. And so like the tool failing to do something actually, I think, makes it better. Although you can't really use this to do anything very rhythmic. Although you can like generate collections of samples and put them into a DAW, and actually have a recording of this famous experimental piece in C doing that. It's called In Say. And so then sort of like reflecting on why this matters. It's something I've alluded to before. It's sort of something that I've picked up from this Brian Eno quote. I'll just say it. Whatever you now find weird, ugly, uncomfortable, and nasty about a new medium will surely become its signature. It's the sound of failure. So much modern art is the sound of things going out of control, of a medium pushing to its limits and breaking apart. And I think it's interesting to sort of like work with these tools that were intended to do one thing and actually really failed to do that. So like Mac and Talk and Say are not very legible or natural sounding voices, but I think as we push forward where there really isn't a way to tell the difference between what's a real voice and what's an artificially generated voice, that we're going to have a sort of nostalgia for a time when you could tell the difference, and when just the sonic qualities of these tools sort of have an appeal, an aesthetic or an artistic appeal rather than an informational appeal. And that kind of gets at this idea of like the singularity, which I think is interesting. So this is what tech bros sort of describe as the singularity, that there's this idea of like static humanness that stays, pretty stable over time, and that AI is sort of exponentially growing, and that at a point when we reach, AGI, artificial general intelligence, that AI will, reach humanness, and there will be no way to tell the difference. I think, what we're seeing through, the development of speaking machines over time is that they become less and less about the expressiveness of human language and speech and singing, and more just these tools to convey information. And I think that's reflects this more realistic view of the singularity, which is that capitalism dehumanizes us over time to the point that it makes it easier for AI to approximate humanness, because we're all slowly being turned into machines. And if you work in an Amazon fulfillment center, if you are tasked with training these models, you're largely functioning like a machine, and the capitalists think of you like a machine. And so it sort of brings up this question of what is the role of art in the form, in these times of artificial intelligence and the singularity. And I'm kind of just sort of saying that art is about just fully pushing us out of this paradigm and calling into question what is human, what is time, what are these technologies actually for. How can we reconfigure them in a way that calls into question this sort of paradigm that we're currently operating in. Yeah, so that's it. I'm going to try very briefly to do a live demo. So we'll see how that works. So this is like the command line version of Saysynth. All these parameters, there's a ton of them, can be specified, but they can also be sort of expressed in this like YAML format, which you can kind of see up here, which I showed too. So yeah, we'll just play. This is like something. It's going to just kind of be a drone. One thing I've like implemented recently, like basically this week, is it takes a little while to come on. Like alternative tunings, which is cool. They're going to come on. It's a fair.
You're playing it out of the Mac Mini speaker, it's not the HDMI.
It should be. Yeah. You just clicked on the same speakers. Oh, I didn't put the sound cable in, did I? That would be a problem. Takes a little while to come on. But basically the way I play it is I just like yeah, you're right. Should be headphones. Yeah, it takes a while to come on. So I basically just play it by like triggering a ton of these and slowly changing stuff. Kind of makes these nice drones. Can't do like arpeggi. Just let that go for a while. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, and kind of what I was talking about is like, so there is something called speech synthesis markup language, and that's like a standardized syntax for expressing prosody and pitch curves, but it's nowhere near as expressive as the one that's built into Say or older versions of Say. So you can just like specify relative pitch, but you can't say like a specific frequency value. And so like that's kind of the like as these things have gotten more sophisticated and more lifelike, our ability to play with them and control them has decreased, and our ability to use them as creative tools has decreased, which I think is interesting. Yeah. 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 So there's like I just added the ability to pass in alternative tunings. So Wendy Carlos put out an album called The Beauty and the Beast or something in the 80s, and that was a tuning that she used in that album. All those tunings just came from Ableton's like built-in tuning. So I have a library called the file types are called Ableton Scala.ascl. So I have a library that I just developed that like parses all those, and it maps like a MIDI number 0 to 127 onto an alternative tuning. So it's not just like 12 tet anymore. Oh. So there's a bunch of different tunings that you can use. Cool.